my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I thought I would share with you guys a list of books that remind me why I love reading. These are all books that during reading or by the time I came to the end of it, I was just like, yes, this is what it's all about. And the idea came to me the other day. I was just kind of looking through my shelves, and these were all the kind of books that even just seeing their spine sitting on a bookshelf, I get that feeling in my chest that I got when I read them, just about how much I loved them. So maybe you're in a reading slump and you're looking for something to get you back into it, or maybe you're just looking for a good book to pick up. So hopefully if you're fit into one of those two categories, you will find something here for you. I got my notebook where I've written them down, and these are just the first 10 that kind of came to mind when I was looking around. There are of course many, but I think this list has a pretty good mixture of classics, newer releases, everything in between. So we're just gonna get on into it. Okay. Just looking at this, I was like, we're gonna start off heavy here. This book was actually published this year, and I read it this year. This book hit me like a ton of bricks in the face in the best possible way. It moved me in a way that I haven't been moved in a long time by a book, and that is On the Savage Side by Tiffany McDaniel. There are no words to explain to you this book. First of all, let me just show you this picture. This is the picture I sent to my husband when I finished the book. I was like, I finished it. This is what I sent him. This book is the story of two sisters named Daisy and Arcade. Just popping in here to tell you I misspoke. It's Daffodil, not Daisy. And it's the story of their lives. And they live in Ohio, and girls are going missing. I don't even know what else to tell you, because I don't know that I could talk about it without crying. It's Tiffany McDaniel. The way that she writes, unparalleled. I feel like this woman is going to go on, like in the years and decades to come, we're going to look at Tiffany as a master of her generation. I truly believe that, because her writing is so spectacular. So, two sisters in Ohio. Girls are going missing, and we learn about these girls' lives in such excruciating detail. And it's so beautiful, but it is so painful. So I will warn you, if you don't want your heart punched the whole time you're reading the book and then have it ripped out and put in a blender and that blender turned on by the end, maybe skip it. But if you know that catharsis that comes from a good, deep soul, gut-wrenching sob, this is the one. This is it. Okay, number 2 is another one I read this year, and this one is Bunny by Mona Awad. This book took me so by surprise. I knew people loved it, and obviously you go into a book hoping to love it, but I had so much fun with this. It's absolutely off the wall bonkers in the most fun possible way. It's about a girl who goes to school. She goes to college, and she meets a group of girls who call themselves the Bunnies. And they all call each other Bunny. And that becomes insane when you're reading it. There's this one part of the book where they're all talking to each other, but you don't know who's speaking. Not that it matters, because they're all just calling each other Bunny. It's like a fever dream, this book. So anyway, she meets this group of girls, and they have this thing called the Smut Salon, where they meet and write, because they're all in a writing program. And so then our main character quickly finds out that there's something off with these girls, and they've got this sort of magic to them where they are taking bunnies, like literal rabbits, and transforming them into boys. And these boys are broken. They scream. Since they're not humans, they're rabbits. They don't know why they now have human bodies. It's a whole thing. And it's a really fun read. If you don't mind something that's crazy, but a lot of fun, check out Bunny. Next up, Any Stuart McLean. any Stuart McLean. I'm currently rereading Christmas at the Vinyl Cafe for my podcast episode in December, but any Stuart McLean. What he does is he writes short stories. Back in the day, he used to write them and then read them on his radio program. And then they were put into books, collections, and there's a ton of them, and they're great. They all revolve around this one family of a mom and dad. Their names are Dave and Morley, and then their kids. And so like each story is kind of from a different family member's point of view. They're hilarious. They'll touch your heart. They're wonderful. Stuart McLean was a very talented storyteller. And you know, for so many decades, telling stories about the same group of 4 people, so good, so good. The Christmas collection is fantastic. You can also listen to all of his stories on Spotify if you don't want to read them, but you would like to hear them, and they're just so good. He's one of those authors that I can pick up one of his books if I'm feeling down and know I will instantly feel better. Plus, for their short stories, they're quick and easy to read, so it's perfect for if you're in a reading slump and want to get out of it. So that's Stuart. Okay, next up. Again, this is a more recent release, but when I was done this book, and even while I was reading it, I knew I had come across something special in terms of the author, who I've since read more books from and loved, plus the storytelling. That is The Last House on Needless Street by Catcher on a Ward. She's such an interesting storyteller. And this is another one that's going to be kind of hard to talk about because it's kind of hard to talk about. This is the story of a man, a young girl, and a cat. They all live in a house together. And that's one part of the story. Then from the other side, there's a woman who's just moved to this town because she's looking for her sister who's long been missing. And she begins to suspect that the man in this house had something to do with it. From there, the story just builds, and I really enjoyed it. It was unlike anything I've ever read. The way the story's told, the details that go into the story, and the way they're woven in there, like you'll read something and you're like, okay, I know this is going to be important later. I know it. And then when you go back after you've read it, once you know the final gist of the story, and it's incredible to see those details. As I was reading, I kind of had an idea what was going on, especially the closer I got to the end. And I was right, but even that doesn't take away from the book because you're so incredibly excited to see how she's going to arrive there. And the payoff was great. I know this one's very divisive, kind of like Bunny. People either love it or they hate it. I loved it. Maybe you would too. Next up on the list, we have The Best Kind of People by Zoe Whittall. Zoe's a Canadian writer, and this was the first book of hers that I had read. I remember one day just kind of looking online for suggestions for excellent books by Canadian authors. And this one was on many, many lists. And I ordered it, and oh my goodness. This book has the most, for me, the most gut-wrenching final line ever. Ever. It's the story of a family. There's a mom and a dad and kids. Anyway, the dad gets accused of sexual inappropriateness with a student, I believe. It's been a few years now since I've read it. With a student at the school he teaches at. And this comes as a shock because, like, this man is very beloved in the community. You know, very well regarded, very respected. And so it's kind of, the story's from his family's point of view, and how this accusation affects them and their lives. And it was told so beautifully. And that final sentence, it's a must read in my opinion. She's a very talented author. I've read other books from her since then, I think 2 or 3, and they're good. But this one is my favorite. Would recommend. Okay, next up we've got some classics. First of all, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I haven't read a ton of Virginia Woolf, but this one is perfect. I actually saw back, I guess probably 20 years ago now, a movie called The Hours, starring Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman, and Julianne Moore, and it was an adaptation of Mrs. Dalloway, done in a very, well, kind of an adaptation of Mrs. Dalloway, done in a very creative way. If you haven't seen that, I would definitely recommend. It's a story told through 3 separate time periods. One is Virginia Woolf's, and then there's one in like the 50s, and then one in more recent day. And the movie's so good. So when I was done, I immediately went and picked up this book. And it's so good. It's the story of one day in a woman's life as she's getting ready to throw a party. She's tending to details pertaining to that party. She's picking up flowers. She's getting everything ready. Then throughout the book, you know, she's getting ready for the party, and she's also remembering the past and the way it just kind of all meshes together. It's great. It's not too long. If you want to dive, if you've never read anything by Virginia Woolf, I think this is a great place to dive in. Next up is a book that was given to me for Christmas one year, probably about 22, 23 years ago now. I'd opened it up on Christmas Eve. It was a gift from my Aunt Carolyn, and I took it to bed with me that night, and I read the whole thing, and it's so good. And that's The Propit by Khalil Gibran. Did I say that already? I hope I'm saying his name right. I've never heard anyone say it out loud. That's just the way I've said it since reading it. But this is, first of all, very short read, but it's just kind of life lessons told in a way. It's like a man speaking to a group of people, sharing with him his message of many things: love, life, children, parenthood, like all of these things. And it's so beautiful. And I've heard things about the author since, that maybe he wasn't the greatest person. But this book is wonderful, and it's got some really poignant messages about life. And honestly, it's a great, I was like 18 or 19 when it was given to me, or 20. And it was just at the right time. I think it's a great gift to give to someone younger who's maybe just getting started out in adulthood in their life. I thought it was great, and a great gift. Let's see what else we have here. Next up, we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This was Emily's only novel, and I first read this when I was in high school, and it just kind of, it was one of those books that you read when you're young that sticks with you forever and ever and ever. It's the story of Catherine and Heathcliff, and about their passionate, all-consuming love that in the end nearly destroys them and everybody else that they know. I recently, buddy read it with a friend here on YouTube, Brandy, and it was interesting to read it again as an adult. I still really enjoyed it because it reminds me of when I read it as a kid. And I really enjoy all of the Bronte sisters, and Wuthering Heights will remain a favorite. I know it's controversial. I know not everybody loves it, but I love it. And if you haven't read any of the Bronte sisters, I mean, sure, you could start with Jane Eyre, but why not start with this one? Go on. And if you hate it, don't blame me, but maybe you'll love it. So the final sort of classic on here is A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. I love Hemingway. I love him. I've read all of his books. One day I want to do a video on Hemingway talking about my favorites. If you would be interested in that, let me know. I love him so much. I love the simple way that he writes, the simple way he tells a story that is, like I said, simple, but also very poignant. I don't know. I think he's great. He's kind of one of those guys that writes man books, if that makes sense. Like some authors, they just write, but there's just such a masculine energy to Hemingway's books, and I love that about them. And A Movable Feast is my favorite. It's kind of a memoir from the time he spent in Paris when he was a younger man. And if you haven't read any Hemingway, I would suggest starting with this because it's kind of a more engaging type of story where he's telling about his life, the other famous writers that he was friends with, who he would spend time with in Paris. Whereas like kind of his classics, like The Old Man and the Sea, stuff like that, it's a little grittier to get into. This one's perfect. It's perfect. If you love him and haven't read it, definitely read it. And if you haven't read him and you want somewhere to start, this is it. And finally, the final book I'm going to mention to you guys today is from one of my newly found, well, I guess in the past like 5 or 6 years, I found his books. He's another Canadian author, and he's got 3 that I've read, excellent ones. But the one I'm going to put on my list as, I keep going back and forth, you guys, but I'm going to say Foe by Ian Reid. He's also written I'm Thinking of Ending Things and We Spread. I loved all 3 of them. So I went back and forth between Foe and We Spread for this video, but I think we're going to go with Foe. It's the story of a girl named Hen and a man named Junior. And one day, they live kind of out in the middle of nowhere on a farm. One day there's a knock at their door. It's a stranger. And he's like, I'm here to take Junior. And he's being sent to space, I think, on an experimental trip. Just him. You're going to stay here, but don't worry. We're going to send you a replacement Junior. You won't. It'll look like him, talk like him. And you're going to have a great time while he's gone. Then he'll come back. Everything will be fine. And it's just sort of a slow burn, creepy story that fills you with dread the entire time. And I think Ian's so good at that. That slow building dread. Excellent. Excellent. And every time I read one of his books, I get so excited because I know it's going to make me think, challenge the way I think about certain things. Stuff like that. He's just a very thought-provoking author, and I always get very excited when I hear he's got a new book coming out. Plus, this one's going to be a movie, or it is a movie. It already exists as a movie, but here in Canada, at least, it's going to be up on Prime soon, I believe, and I can't wait to see it. It stars Paul Mescal, and I always butcher this poor woman's name, Saoirse? You know, Saoirse Ronan? I think that's how you say it. I don't know. But the 2 of them, I love them both so much. And she is gorgeous and so talented. Paul's also very talented. Can't wait to see this story brought to life. So there you go. Those are 10 books that remind me of why I love reading. It also works as 10 books that remind me of why I love writing. But for the purposes of this video, it's reading. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We got Vlogmas coming up soon. It's not going to be a vlog every day, but it's going to be a video every day. There'll be vlogs. There'll be bookish content. I got a pile of Christmas books I can't wait to read and share with you guys. So we've got that coming up very soon. It's like the 27th, I think, as I'm filming this, and probably when I'm posting it. Just a few days. Anyway, take care, guys. Bye.